Hello, good morning. Welcome everyone. I'm just checking the sound and making sure that you can hear me well. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I know it has been a really hectic morning here in Belém due some protesters are around the venue, and that is making us a little bit late, and a couple of our panelists are probably still in the line, so if we jump in the middle of the event, here we go. But with that, let me present myself. My name is Eva Brashovskaite. I am a lead trade and green transition from the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and I'm delighted to be here at the World Green Economy Organization Pavilion, where we are kicking off our session on trade, climate, and industrial policy in a world that is desperately warming. Today, I am being joined on this panel by Mr. Rodrigo Lima, a managing partner of Agroecone, and by Ms. Via Azlide Vidiadi from the CSIS Indonesia. She's a research associate there. I will give you both an opportunity to present yourself and the things that you're doing at your respective organizations in just a second. In the meanwhile, I invite you to take the floor. Let me introduce a little bit the concept of a session and why we are talking about the things we are talking about today. We do know that one of the main themes of this COP30 is the discussion about how green trade can catalyze industrial decarbonization and move us to the so much needed 1.5 degrees pathways. We do see the global ambition increasing, even if it's a bit too slow, even if it's not going the way we actually want it to go, but it increases globally, including in really such crucial emerging economies such as Brazil or Indonesia. Yet we are also operating in the situation of very fragmented geopolitical situation, of big discussions around energy security needs. We have unilateral measures that are risking to fragment the global trading system, even though their objectives are quite undebatable, I would even say. And we clearly see that we need a lot more alignment between the policies that different governments are adopting. With this, I'll probably invite first Rodrigo and then Dia just to quickly introduce themselves and let us know what they're doing in their organizations. Rodrigo.
Thanks, Eva. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join this panel. I'm Rodrigo Lima, partner and director of Agroecone. That is a consultancy in Brazil. We work with sustainable agriculture and renewable energy. And the interlinkages between climate change and trade is at the center of our work as an organization that is willing and working to push forward innovation and sustainable development in different sectors. I came from WTO and all the international trade regulations and world, and then started to follow UNFCCC since 2008 in Poznan, and how this integration might happen and can be promoted. That is, as you mentioned, a topic that is being discussed, and potentially at the climate action, there's one solution to create a fora to discuss and bring WTO close to UNFCCC and UNFCCC to WTO, because ultimately, the more fragmented measures we have, more chaos we will end up between sectors, and measures that aims to reduce emissions but create different standards, different ways to do life cycle analyses, and everyone has its own motto that is the best motto, but then there's another one and another one, and trying to find this common ground, this level playing field using a WTO language. It's the real challenge. So we work on this, and it's great to join the panel.
Thank, thank you so much, Rodrigo. And I'll invite Via to also speak a little bit about what she does at CSIS Indonesia and what the center is doing themselves.
Thank you, Eva, for inviting me in this panel. So my name is Via Widyadi. I'm from CSIS Indonesia, specifically from Climate Policy Research Unit. So CSIS Indonesia is a independent think tank based in Indonesia. So we work on some international and strategic issues such as economics, international relations, and also politics and social change. But lately, in the past 5 years, we built a new unit, which is climate unit. And this is basically the intersection of those pillars, the international relations, economics, and politics, but also we're looking at the climate issues. And in CSIS, we are working now a lot on climate and trade issues, as well as industrial decarbonization, energy transitions, and also financing and investment. And we actually have a lot of research portfolio on those topics. And we actually, in the last 3 years, have already launched a hub, namely Decarbonization for Development Lab. So it's basically a knowledge hub for climate and trade issues in Indonesia. We started in Indonesia, but we aim to also expand more. And it's basically for having like a like-minded people to share more on climate and trade issues, on their research, and what are their initiatives and programs on those issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Via. And I must disclose that those people are not complete strangers to International Institute for Sustainable Development. We have had so many successful projects together, and we hope to cooperate in the future. A lot of our projects circle around this interlap between trade and climate, and what can emerging economies like Brazil or Indonesia do, or what the role that they can play. And this, yeah, can I maybe start asking the question to you? When we're thinking about green industrial policy measures, how can we design them to make sure that we really can maximize the positive climate and economic impacts, and we reduce the risk of those measures being inefficient, wasteful, increasing the inequity?
Thank you very much for the question, Sieva. Actually, at CSIS Indonesia, we are having ongoing research on green industrial policies, especially from the global south perspectives and Indonesia. And firstly, we need to clearly state the objectives of the green industrial policy, because it has two main objectives. First is to decarbonize the current value chain and supply chain, and secondly is to develop more low carbon technologies and enhance more capabilities in those sectors. And those two are quite distinct and different, and having different approaches. So it must be clearly stated in the development of the policy planning itself, because it may result to different policy instruments as well. And that's the first one. And secondly is to also notice and navigating the global dynamics. in this current world where China's dominance on those green sectors, we need to really put China on the table, because what we also see from the past research that already researching on green industrial policies, uh, most of them also not really updating on the those China's dominance, because as a global South countries, we are at these advantages as we are quite a latecomer to the green industrial policy. For example, like previously, if we talk about China, actually uh, their strategy first is to enhance its export first, and it's proceeding to increasing the domestic uptake of renewable energy. But those kind of policies and practice, we cannot just replicate that to our planning, because now it's probably so much different. We need to compete with China's cost competitive advantage of low carbon technologies, for example, and that's quite hard to enter the market. And secondly, is we see that there is a sign of supply realignment, which I see that China is moving upstream on some green products, and they now currently also expanding its product and using connector economies. So we see that from the global south perspective, we also need to also have a strategic openness on this, so that we are not losing this window of opportunity. And thirdly is we see that there is a fracture of trade governance, where currently the trend of the trade is more like unilateral and more block trade compared to multilateralism, probably. And we see that this also affecting us as a global south to adapt to the current conditions in the globally. And this also having a risk of, for example, because they also redefine what goods are exportable, the risk of subsidy wars also prominent. And this implication, we see that for the global south countries, we also are facing trilemma, what we call trilemma. First is about the localizing of green technology to domestic industry, and secondly is to have a cost competitive technology, and thirdly is to decarbonize quickly. We might be cannot choose all those three, but we might be only can choose two out of those three because of this current condition. And what I say is designing green industrial policy for latecomers. First is we need to have a strong domestic demand, as what I said. Like China's previous policies is more to export more green products, but we as a global south cannot just do copy that and compete with the current markets. So the first one is also to build our domestic demand. For example, like green public procurement policies and those kind of policies. And second is to have more strategic openness to the current supplier alignment that I previously mentioned. And the third one is to also project domestic principles of growth. Like we as a global south need to also actively engaging to current dialogues on trade, for example, and we cannot just, we cannot say that we're not ready for example, like CBAM or other stuff, but we also need to actively, to actively doing something in order to actively participate on the dialogue. But this kind of strategy, we also need to know that the underlining part is having an effective governance and also contribute to social equity, which is very important. So just element in this just transition element, we need to make sure that this is also on the table. And Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vidya. And actually, really, your answer packed quite a punch. And I'll pick up on a couple of things. I think we'll all get to the issue of trade governance in a few moments. But you also mentioned subsidies, and I think we're having so many discussions about the spillovers of such measures, positive as negative. And this is what I wanted to ask Rodrigo more about. How, when designing green industrial policies, we can think about those spillovers to make sure that we are we're getting only the best ones, right? And I think that your experience, especially working on agricultural subsidies, will be very useful to unpack this debate a little bit.
This is really a challenging question, and I will start saying that from with one example of what we are living in Brazil. There's decarbonization of in industries in Brazil is really an important topic, and there are, because we rely on a very renewable energy matrix. 50% of the energy matrix is renewable, and electricity is 90%. So companies already have an advantage in terms of renewables on their value chains, but some promising technologies that we need to be able to move towards carbon neutrality up to 2050, that is the Brazilian target, such as carbon capture and storage and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage backs, because bioenergy in Brazil is extremely relevant. There's no subsidy to support companies to create new plants with BECS technologies. There is one project under development by one company. It will start to operate, but it is really expensive. And we have on our plans, mitigation plans that are not approved up to now. It is supposed to be approved, what we call the climate plan, to orient the mitigation actions of the different sectors, including industry and energy, all the sectors, but thinking about industry and energy. And, and we don't have yet a subsidy or a kind of support to enable those companies to really invest in those technologies that will support Brazil towards climate neutrality. And when we jump from this example from Brazil to a broader example for different countries, the first thing I would highlight is that from a climate perspective, allowing sectors to engage into innovation towards decarbonization, it's totally okay. Everyone agrees. The challenge is to have the, the, the regulations from countries, the fiscal space, all the investments, and so on. But from a trade perspective, those subsidies might be against WTO rules. So imagine if we had at the WTO an agreement on subsidies that would be considered green subsidies, the green box, not green subsidies, the green box at WTO that would be allowed under WTO rules, narrow to energy transition, to achieve the global stocktake, and so on. We don't have anything like this at WTO right now. WTO when WTO was approved in 1995, there was a peace clause to start the organization from the GATT to WTO. There was a peace clause to, as an interim period, where countries would be able to adopt some measures and not one go against each other, to quick start and bring everyone to a moment where they would be able to adopt the WTO agreements and so on, and to support companies and the private sector to engage into this new moment. Why not to think as a WTO agreement, or not necessarily an agreement, because this is from a multilateral perspective. There's the whole debates of WTO in the coming years, but a decision at WTO aligned with UNFCCC on subsidies that would be allowed and incentivized as a way to create and enable countries in specific industries, and specific industries in specific countries that are not at the best technological level by now, because it requires several investments, several regulatory policies, such as potentially subsidies to enable those countries to become competitive and to produce more sustainably. Because otherwise, those countries that has capacity to give subsidies will provide subsidies, and the other country that has no capacity will try to compete producing the same product inefficiently in terms of carbon emissions. And then there's measures of such as the C-band that will put all the competitors in the same stage and say, now you should do that, but I don't have support to be able to produce as you have or other country has. So in my mind, subsidies and other types of trade measures that can support countries on energy transition, just to stay with energy transition, that is a huge umbrella, would be something that UNFCCC and WTO should pursue in the coming years, because otherwise we will continue to have specific policies in some places, in some countries, to help their companies to improve, and other countries will stay behind. And there, what is the level playing field we're talking about? There's no fair competition. Assuming that carbon is a key challenge for everyone on the field, but how different players, different industries from different countries play using different shoes, it's difficult. So in my mind, if WTO and UNFCCC can evolve to try to build upon what means subsidies to energy transition, safeguard measures, anti-dumping, and other measures that will allow countries to at least countries that most need, and we're talking about developing countries for sure, because otherwise they will face competition and with countries that has support, and more broadly they will be on the market being required to comply with measures that in some cases they won't be able to comply. And this is again using WTO language. There's no level playing field. It's unbalanced, and how developing countries will improve. Again, having in mind that reducing emissions is at the center of the agenda, and I think for everyone this is at the center.
Thanks so much, Rodrigo, and also thank you for really going the way where we were expecting the session to be going. That is a question of, so what is missing in our international trade and climate governance, right? Where are those gaps that we need to fill with a new rule? Do we need to tighten some regulations? Do we need to actually expand some regulations and give more space for some developing countries? So basically, where do we need to go? Do we need to actually overhaul the whole political rule book, or do you think that just kind of looking at very specific fixes would be sufficient? My biggest question is, are we in there for another 10 or 20 years of negotiations, and can we do this before the climate crisis is over? I'll probably start with Via because you were the first one to mention trade governments, so that falls on you, and I'll probably ask Rodrigo to provide reflections on the same question.
Thank you. Probably you are the expert on this topic. I'm just gonna have a few comments that we see that in CSIS in our research we see that the current trade rules also not really designed for like the world we live in right now, where the major economies players also have the large green industrial policies, and on the other hand, like the decarbonization itself is also really depends on the government itself to regulate, and agree with what you said as well that we see that the WTO and multilateralism currently also weakened in some ways, so that many countries also moving to more like unilateral and also post-block kind of trade rules. And we see that there is also a blurry lines of what are allowed and what are needed. Just like you said about the subsidies, not only about like the green subsidies, but also about the regulation of harmful subsidies, which also somehow in the gray area. So this is kind of like the thing that we need to also make sure first, because not only incentives but also disincentive, the stick and the carrot. And second, yeah, we see that the WTO is currently weakened, and this creates also the fragmentation of current trade rules, and also create a disadvantage for the latecomer economies like Indonesia and Brazil probably, and other global south countries as well. And we underline like several reforms that probably urgently needed. First is to have more certainty of policy space in like the next 10 to 20 years that previously you mentioned, so that it gives space for the global south countries to adapt and to as well catch up to the current condition, and also enhance our capabilities to keep up, especially for the green industrial policies. And secondly is to have a fair and common principles for trade measures, and this is where again for the global south countries we are also need to be more active in not only responding but also shaping the whatever happening in the global agenda right now, and the discipline of lastly is this discipline of those kind of the blurry lines that we highlighted. So yeah, that's my comment, Rob.
Thanks. I think it's time to really. I totally agree. The climate crisis is here. We need to act now, and there are a lot of things happening. But the interface of trade and climate change, if the perspective is simply creating barriers to trade because there's emissions in some products or processing methods of PPMs, processing and production methods, that is the WTO language, we will end up with a complete war of measures, fragmented, as you mentioned, via that is the fragmentation of measures might end up creating barriers to trade and not delivering emissions reduction. So at the end, this is about supporting climate change, or at the end, this is about using an instrument as protectionist measures. I think this is something very important to consider when more and more fragmented measures are applied. Because we have the NDCs, and again, WTO and UNFCCC must walk hand in hand. They are observers one to each other. But what does this mean? Someone from WTO must be here. That's it, following the COP and understanding the decisions. But come on, I'm saying that we need cooperation in practical terms. It's reasonable to agree a decision that will be adopted at WTO and recognized under the UNFCCC regarding subsidies and other trade measures to support tripling renewables up to 2030, because countries must buy technologies to produce renewables, or must buy directly the renewable energy. So they will need trade at least to bring a huge machinery to your company that is buying technology from China, for example, or from, I don't know, Germany. So WTO, in my view, and I'm not saying that this is easy, because it is not. But if we take a look, the past three WTO reports are struggling to talk about how trade and sustainable development, how trade and climate change must try to walk hand in hand. Because otherwise we will end up with a complete war of measures. And I fear that the climate objectives won't be achieved as we expect. And protectionism will flourish, and this is good for whom? Good for those who are imposing the measures. So my take is, and my suggestion is that really, if the action agenda of trade and climate that is being proposed by Brazilian presidency gives birth to this initiative. I don't remember the name now, but it's a international trade and climate working group. This is not the name, but if this is really created and starts to operate between next year, after COP30, from next year on, we need, as parties of the UNFCCC and as members of the WTO, to agree on some ways to push those synergies forward. And for me, energy transition should be the start, because energy transition would deliver the most promising results towards the 1.5 goal. It's not easy. That's okay. COPs are not easy. The multilateralism of climate change is not easy. Yes, it's not easy. The trade and the geoeconomics, all the critical minerals and so on, this is not easy. This is the world. This is reality. But one thing is to assume that it's not easy and let's get the fragmentation and the unilateral measures as a solution, or try to build common solutions that will bring all of us together to improve. And I love to see the Sustainable Development Goals as something aspirational, but not just aspirational. The SDGs should lead us, and SDG 13 is one of them, climate change. There are several waters: innovation, jobs, and circularity, and partnership 17, for example. So I'll sum up saying that if WTO and UNFCCC using this potential climate action from next year on to really, let's work on how to put trade to support energy transition and support companies in Indonesia, Brazil, everywhere to improve their production methods, including carbon, because they will be able to receive subsidies, to get finance, to buy different technologies, because there's access to different technology. Access to technologies is something, it seems something very tricky, but it is not. Maybe we will bring trade and climate more close. And I think this is completely important to generate benefits to the Paris Agreement and to society in a broader terms.
Thank you, Rodrigo. And I want to thank both of our speakers. Before turning to the audience, just to see if we have questions, I think we have covered a lot of ground. And just for anyone who might not remember the name, the new Brazilian initiative, I think it's going to be called the Integrated Forum for Trade and Climate, probably to be announced tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to learn more as we move there. With this, let me turn to the audience and see if anybody would have a question for the panelists. I know it's an early morning. I see. So, can I ask you also to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much for the talk. So my name is Harry from Institute for International Trade, based in Adelaide, Australia. My question is for Rodrigo. So yeah, you have extensive experience in WTO rulings and so on and so forth, and you mentioned about the incoming uh, integrated forum for the climate change and trade. So, and you mentioned that the focus should be energy transition. And how do you see, like, what is the kind of policies or the kind of pairing of the industrial policies and trade policies that should be probably for developing countries should be probably pushed forward? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rodrigo. I'll just need to ask you to probably answer this in around 5 minutes, as unfortunately we won't be able to take any more questions.
Thanks a lot for your question. It's not an easy question because I'm not writing the scope of their work, but my guess is that we need to start with energy transition. I work with agriculture a lot as well, and I think there's a lot of things for agriculture that would benefit from this combined work of climate and trade. And but at least for developing countries, and I think we need to agree some sectors that should benefit from energy transition, climate, and trade measures under this umbrella group that is being created. If we take steel, for example, because there's different approaches towards decarbonizing steel, and everyone has the best approach because, again, right, every company is acting more or less. If we agree some sectors such as steel, such as cement, and there are others, we would be able as multilateral at a multilateral forum to start to really support decarbonization and support trade of decarbonized products, because one of the problems is that if countries accept to buy no matter GHG footprint, and others are asking for reduced emissions, but most of the countries are not, there's the leakage. And everything will be the same. Some will be emission with less carbon, and the most of it will continue to have high intensity. So I tend to believe that we must choose what sectors must start this new phase. It's not easy, again, but we need to do that, because otherwise we will continue with the fragmentation of measures, and potentially some benefits, but competition between countries that are, especially developing countries, that need support to enhance technology innovation towards producing more sustainably. And not just about carbon, producing more sustainably, think broadly in terms of pollution, water, biodiversity, several aspects of sustainable development. So I think this would be some way to start this conversation. Let's hope to have this launch tomorrow at the Action Agenda Pavilion, and expect that how this will evolve from next year as the initiative that will try to combine UNFCCC and WTO.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. And let me thank both of our panelists today for their excellent interventions. Please don't hesitate to have a look at the research that both AgroEcone and Center for Strategic and International Studies Indonesia is doing. You'll find so much more interesting things there than we were able to cover in this short session. With this, I think we'll have to wait and see what happens with the Brazilian pavilion, Brazilian initiative, and whether it actually brings the trade and climate discussions closer together. With that, thank you for your time. See you.